and welcome to a new edition of City Corner, an ongoing discussion program where we have an opportunity to find out more about what's going on in our community. I'm Trish Herron, Communications and Marketing Manager for the City of Richland, and joining us today is Richland Police Chief Chris Skinner. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Trish.
So you're going into your 5th year with us now.
Yeah, it's amazing how fast it's gone by. I started in May of 2011, and so just had our 4th anniversary with the police department and with the city, and starting our 5th year here, and a lot of changes in the police department, a lot of really good things.
So this year you started Coffee with a Cop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Coffee with a Cop it's a nationwide program, so it's not unique to Richland. Mm-hmm. And it's a great tool for community outreach and just building conversation with law enforcement and your community. One of the things that we hear as chiefs, and I've heard over my career, is just the lack of opportunities sometimes to just sit and engage in dialogue over community issues, concerns. Because oftentimes when law enforcement are being dispatched or they're out there doing their jobs, it's usually a call for service or something similar to that. And the other thing that it allows me to do is it allows me to expose myself to the community as well. So I go to all the Coffee with a Cop so that they can have access to me and talk about maybe some of the tough issues that they don't feel comfortable talking with officers about, or even parts of my command staff with. And I've heard some great comments about our police department. I've heard some great suggestions about what we could be doing better. And so at the end of the day, what it is for me is it's dialogue with my community, it's accessibility and responsiveness, and it's an opportunity for us to kind of take a look at ourselves and do a self-evaluation based on their comments and see where there's areas that we can improve on.
What type of demographic have you noticed? Is it a mix, or is it a certain type of person that's showing up?
Well, the first thing we did that was purposeful is we moved it around the city, because we do have different demographics in different parts of the city. Richland's really unique in the way of people that live up in the north end or the downtown core versus South Richland. And so what we tried to do is move it around. So our first one was held at Barracuda, a local coffee shop, locally owned coffee shop, and that's important to me as well, as I try and pick gathering places that benefit local businesses. And that was very successful, and it was our first one. And we had, 20, 25 people show up, kind of mingle in and out, and had some great suggestions about how things are going and their perception of us and how maybe we can help with some of those perceptions. And then the second one we had up at Share House up in South Richland, off of Keene Road. And that was really well attended. And I had some more command staff and officers were there. And we had 30 or 40 people kind of come and show up. And we sat around tables and we had great discussion. And we talked a lot about some of the trends that we're seeing in law enforcement and some of the special interest types of initiatives that we have going on around human trafficking and sex trafficking and the commercial sexual exploitation of children. Which is a real problem these days. Has always been a problem, but has really become known in the last several months as being a problem. And so we've had those kind of discussions. And so the demographics been different in both places. The thing that I'm really excited about is that in both cases, people were really assertive. Were there sitting, waiting for us, wanting to have the dialogue. Initiating dialogue with us as opposed to us coming up and initiating dialogue with them. And so people seem to be really enjoying it.
So I was going to address this later on, but you mentioned it. And so there's been an increase in computer-related crimes, and you spoke about it briefly about the child exploitation. Do you want to speak about that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's a sad topic, but one that we have to be able to have dialogue about and talk about and address. It's not new. These crimes have been occurring for decades. And it's very much like domestic violence was 25, 30, 35 years ago, where so much of that violence in the family was kept within the family, and it was very taboo for us to even deal with from a law enforcement perspective, or even for society to deal with from their perspective. And now as we're kind of uncovering these layers and kind of looking in the dark corners of criminal behavior, we're finding more and more of these children that are being sexually exploited. And now that the internet is just so pervasive in all of our lives, I mean, my 8 and 6-year-old are owners of iPads and have ability to be accessed or have access to. And in our house, it's very restrictive, but not all homes are like that. And we have more and more of these young kids that are being exploited via the internet. And one of the indicators that we found in all of our cases that we have of child exploitation is that in 80% of all of them, there has been internet access for these kids to be exploited. And so we as a police department are taking a really, really strong stance and a very aggressive and proactive stance on kind of that internet crimes against children type of crime. Everything from peer-to-peer file sharing for pornography, which is very pervasive. Even in our area, it's very pervasive. We have programs that help us identify where those files are being shared. Each file has a hashtag value and gets tracked, and we're able to see that. And there's plenty of targets in the Tri-City region with thousands of internet images of children being depicted. And also the commercial exploitation or the sexual trafficking of children. These mostly young women in the ages of 13 to 15, 16 age group that are being commercially trafficked for sexual exploitation, and people are making money off of it. And so we as a police department just decided, you know what, we're going to take a strong stance on that. We've taken a strong stance on other things in the past.
Right.
We continue to take a strong stance on a lot of criminal behavior, but this is one that we are really passionate about right now. And I'm really involved at both the state and national level on human trafficking and what that looks like.
So that stance, is it finding these people, or is there another component as for, I'm a mom of 4, so is there an educational component?
Sure.
We all think that we're good parents and watching our kids, but they're keeping up with technology sometimes more than we as parents are when we're trying to monitor our own kids. So how do you still maintain being a good parent and watching?
There's no question about that. I don't even have a Facebook page for a variety of reasons, but my kids, even at 8 and 6, are becoming much more tech savvy than I will ever be in my lifetime.
Right.
So yeah, we approach this from a bunch of different perspectives. So certainly we have an enforcement perspective that we want to identify those that are victimizing our children, and we want to build a case, and we want to be able to prosecute those individuals, those perpetrators of that crime. That's only one piece of that, though, because part of what our approach should be a victim-centered approach, because a lot of these kids have a tremendous amount of trauma and damage done throughout the exploitation. And so if we just simply approach this from a law enforcement perspective or an investigative perspective, we miss identifying victims and making them survivors. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to create survivors out of victims and throw bad guys in jail. If we can do those two things successfully, then we are on the right track. But we can't do that alone, and so we have a whole host of partners in our area, everything from mental health partners to advocacy to social, variety of social services, including our faith-based community, that come alongside these kids in kind of a multidisciplinary response to make sure that they have the emotional support to help them become survivors. And one of the biggest issues we have, especially when we have a victim of sex trafficking and trying to get them out of that lifestyle and we're trying to do an investigation, is oftentimes we need to house them somewhere else. And whether it's foster kids for foster care for abused or neglected kids, or foster placement for a sex trafficked victim, those beds are very, very scarce. And so we don't have a lot of space to house these victims to help us start down that path of kind of a trauma-centered response and getting the resources that they need so they become survivors. So as a police department, we certainly focus on the investigation. We certainly focus on building a great case to make sure that we can prosecute the offenders, but we also want to make sure that we have a victim-centered approach as well. And not just kind of run right over the top of our victims to get to the end result of a good prosecution. Understanding that part of the win for us as a PD and society is making sure that we have a survivor that's going to be healthy and productive, as mostly, again, women, she re-enters society, and we have some accountability on the offender end.
So you mentioned community partners from a different perspective with respect to the whole approach of what you're talking about, but we have a community approach with respect to law enforcement and matrix and 911. Do you want to address some of that?
Sure. So, we've got a unique situation here where we've got kind of the three bigger cities, that share jurisdictions in some cases. You go over the river to get to Pasco, but certainly Kennewick and Richland share a boundary, as well as does the sheriff's office for the unincorporated parts of Benton County. And there's absolutely no way any one of us could achieve our overall mission of safety and security in our communities without the help of each other. We partner on a variety of teams, whether it's combating narcotics and drugs or gangs, tactics. You've seen a lot in the news over the last year and a half, really, of this special weapons and tactics, or the SWAT team, Tri-City Regional SWAT team, responding to incidents and saving lives in most cases, and in a very few cases where they had to use some lethal force options to end really volatile situations. But all of those teams are collaborative approaches to part of what's the core of the mission for each one of us. And so we absolutely need each other to be able to fulfill those. Any one of us singly could not do that. We just don't have the resources to be able to do that. So those partners are really, really important. But even bigger than that is kind of the way the law enforcement community has embraced our social service partners, and how we've recognized that the social service partners are a big part of our overall mission. For instance, the huge gap in mental health services that we're trying to address. We have a recent partnership with Lourdes that has a transition center here in Richland where for qualifying crimes, we have an opportunity to get people that need the mental health treatment in lieu of going to jail. Going to jail is not the best option for certain people that are committing certain low-level crimes as a result of their mental illness. It just doesn't make sense to arrest somebody and put them in jail where they can't get the treatment that they need, and have taxpayers pay for a daily bed rate for people to sit incarcerated when what they really need is mental health services. And so that's one partnership that I think is really vital and will continue to be vital as we try and achieve our mission, is just coming alongside our social service providers and helping us bring the resources that we need to the population that we're serving.
So how does something like that work? Does your arresting officer do a quick evaluation based off of certain criteria, or do they start with the system and then they're pulled out with Lourdes? How does that happen?
Well, generally speaking, the people that we come into contact with are known to the system. They've either been evaluated before, have a history of mental illness. And the piece that's really tricky is that there's only certain crimes that really qualify them for the transitional types of scenario. Any of the violent crimes that we're seeing with people would not qualify them for that. But some of the low-level crimes that oftentimes are committed by people that are suffering from mental illness, disorderly conduct, for instance, or certain types of behaviors in public. Those are the types of things that we can get them, instead of just arresting them on a low-level misdemeanor and taking them to jail. We can do the deferred sentencing or defer that arrest and take them to the transitional center here at Lourdes and get them back into program, maybe back on their medication, maybe back in some mental health counseling that would help them. So there's a few moving parts to it. We do, as far as early on when we triage somebody that we're going to come into contact with, we do have direct contact with the mental health providers at crisis, and oftentimes they know who we're dealing with, and they're able to give us some really good information about whether or not they would qualify for the transitional center here. So it is very much a collaborative approach. It's just not officers going out there and just making their own decisions about people's mental wellness. We do have some clinicians that are able to help us identify that.
So I'm a fireman's daughter. We've had this discussion before.
And I still like you.
I know.
Okay.
But you mentioned the word triage, and most people evaluate triage or consider that in a situation where someone's hurt and they need to be triaged. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you would use that terminology while evaluating a suspect or a perpetrator.
Sure. Right.
It's
right. Well, the triage. The type of triage that we do mostly when I use that descriptor, if you will, is when we deal with what we see as victims. And we really see a lot of these mental health patients as victims, not as suspects. And that's the way we should approach it. So when I talk about triaging that, we need to identify what's going on here, as opposed to when I started in law enforcement, we didn't have the depth of understanding, and we really didn't have the depth of training that we have now. And if you acted out regardless of what the issue was, you went to jail. And that was kind of the old school way of doing it. And I'm happy to say that we've grown as a profession and we've become smarter, understanding that there's a few things here at work that maybe contribute to criminal behavior. Not everybody commits a crime out of kind of from the black part of their heart and wanting to do that. Some people just commit crimes because they just don't know any better. And so when I talk about triage, it really is an evaluation period about, okay, is this really a bad guy that needs to go to jail, or is this somebody that we need to be able to enlist social service help with to try and, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we want to reduce recidivism. We're not reducing recidivism if we're just arresting people that are either under the influence of a narcotic and committing crimes and not getting them the help, or somebody that's suffering from mental illness and not getting them the help and then throwing them in jail, and when they get released and just believe that they're not going to commit the same crimes.
Right.
So, I'm trying to put myself out of business by reducing crime. I don't have much hope that that's going to happen overall. But if we take that type of approach, I think we're better served.
So another approach, not that this would put you out of business, but your community outreach has grown leaps and bounds. If it, at least from my perspective, and maybe that's just because I'm more aware, but it just seems like you guys are out and about at almost every function.
Right. Very purposeful for us. When I got here, I recognized, I heard a couple things. I met with some community members before I started this job, and I heard a couple things. One was that they were really, really impressed with the level of service that the police department had as far as investigating crimes, responding to calls for service, being able to identify bad guys that needed to go to jail, and the stuff that people kind of generally associate with law enforcement. The piece that we needed to work on was kind of that connection with the community. I heard from people, we want to know who our police department is. We want to support you even more than we support you today, but it's easier to support you if we know who you are as a person and understand who we are as individuals and who we are as an organization. So we've really, really focused hard on that. Coffee with a Cop is a great example. We talked about that a little earlier. Moving to a district model of policing where I'm anchoring officers to districts, so oftentimes people will see the same officer for a period of time and kind of get to know them and have their district officer being able to respond for calls for service. Our ability to leverage technology and outreach with community and our business community, especially giving them ways to communicate with us, has been a big part of that. Our community services officer has done a fantastic job of growing. I think we had 9 neighborhood watch groups when I started 4 years ago. I think we're up to like 38 or 39 now. And those neighborhood watch groups are as effective as they want to be because it takes some initiative to do that. We kind of provide the background and some of the care and feeding, but then the real value of neighborhood watch is the neighbors really buying in and taking off and growing that. And then the events that we do throughout the year that we attend, as you pointed out, we have a National Night Out coming up on Tuesday, August 4th, I believe.
Yes.
And it's at John Dam Plaza, and it's kind of coupled with City Fair. Is that what it's called? And so we're super excited about that because it kind of brings everybody together, and it's in John Dam Plaza, which is a great venue. We've been down at Howard Amon, which is also a fantastic venue, but John Dam's kind of it's our favorite part because it's right next to the police department.
Of course.
And so
police officers never love to brag about themselves.
I know,
right?
we never love to brag about ourselves. Only if there's if the fire service is around, we like to brag about ourselves. But usually we're pretty humble. But John Dam Plaza is going to be a great venue for that, and it's a great night of partnership with our local businesses and our local community to talk about what a great place we live in. But that doesn't happen by accident, and we can't be complacent, and we have to be vigilant about making sure that crime doesn't take hold in the city of Richland.
So we spoke earlier about a regional approach, and you and I were talking offline about different trending patterns. What's a trending pattern in Richland?
You know, Richland's unique in the way, when it comes to criminal behavior or criminal activity, Richland's a little bit different than the other two cities. You know, you've seen a lot in the news this last year and a half, and for people that are spending some time with us today listening to this, you know, you can think back over the last year and a half of how violent we've had incidents in the Tri-City region. You know, Pasco has really, really struggled with some violence. Even Kennewick has had some instances of violence. One of the things that's unique to Richland, we're not immune to the violence. So I don't want anybody to believe that I think that that's not going to happen in Richland, because it absolutely can. And it wasn't too long ago, my 5th day on the job, I think, is when we had a violent shootout up on Thayer with a car thief that was under the influence of methamphetamine that fired shots at our officers, and officers fired back and had used lethal force against him. So we're not immune to it at all. But generally speaking, Richland has enjoyed a fairly quiet, violent crime rate. So where we really focus our time and energy is the stuff that, and the crime that really plagues our community, which is thefts and shoplifts, car prowls, and some burglaries. So property crimes really are the ones that we really want to focus on, because those are where our big numbers are. We're going to see small spikes here and there of some other very serious crimes, but we just don't see the numbers. They seem to be more anomalies than they are the norm. Mm-hmm. But what really is the norm for us is the like I said, the burglaries and the shoplifts and the car prowls. And those are very much quality of life things. They make a lot of victims and create a lot of victims. You know, a lot of us have been victimized. I've been victimized from a car prowl. And that's very personal for people to have somebody come and break into their car and steal whatever's in their car, walk into their garage and steal, walk into their house and steal. And then there's also the loss prevention aspect of as our business community grows, we see a huge uptick in the loss prevention aspects of what's going on at our big retailers like Target and Walmart and some of the grocery stores, the Safeway and Albertsons. So we want to pay attention to those things, because we do think that that's anchored to quality of life here, is making sure that we put measures in place to try and proactively prevent those types of things.
Is that through an education component or more presence, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things, and your office has been fantastic in helping us identify good community outreach opportunities to educate people, because what we're still seeing, Trish, is for car prowls, for instance, is that we're still seeing upwards of 70 to 75% of all of the stolen items coming out of cars are coming out of unlocked cars.
Right.
And so, you know, we constantly ask our community to, you know, harden the target for us, help us out,
right.
You know, lock those car doors. And that's tough. It's tough when you have generations of people that grew up in Richland, that was a government town, that the only people that really lived in Richland or even belonged in Richland were associated with the government. And that has certainly changed. And so we ask people to be very, very diligent about locking their cars, locking their houses, making sure their garage doors are shut all the way.
Oh, yes.
And helping us try and, you know, send that trend downward as a result of kind of a community partnership. But there's a variety of strategies that we try and employ to be able to deal with that.
Social media has been so key with some of your outreach efforts. Mm-hmm. It's so easy. You guys post information or a photo that, you know, a business camera has been able to capture. Yeah. We take it, and then either you share it and the media grabs it, or we share it and the media grabs it. It's just amazing how quick the community gets involved.
Well, and you know, it's interesting when we look at society today, we're very much an instant gratification society. I mean, social media has made information available literally at our fingertips and in real time. And if we as a police department aren't willing to embrace that and be able to provide that and kind of feed that need, then A, we miss opportunities to connect with our community, but B, we miss opportunities to use our community as an investigative tool. And that's really what this is about. It's very self-serving from my perspective, is that I want to solve crimes for people, and my best eyes and ears oftentimes aren't the 56 men and women that are the sworn staff at the Richland Police Department, but it may be the 52,000 that are living in Richland now. And so if I can get information to them and get them on the case, then we have a better chance of solving that. And we've got success story after success story of Facebook posts and social media feeds of asking for information and people stepping up and saying, yep, I saw that and this is where I saw it. Coupled with some pretty savvy officers that are good at the social media mining, data mining,
right,
and identifying and inserting themselves into people's social media worlds, if you will, unbeknownst to those people, and engaging them in dialogue. We're solving crimes and doing some pretty neat things with social media.
So we're almost done. Was there anything that we missed, or what would you like people to take away from our discussion today?
Well, I think, I guess if there was one thing that I would want people to know, I mean, I feel like we really have put ourselves out there, and we'll continue to try and do more of that so that they can get to know who we are. I think one of the things that I would like people to know is that this police department, maybe more than police departments they've experienced in the past, is really putting themselves kind of on the cutting edge of what 21st century policing looks like. We're really taking a look at not only just deployment strategies of resources, but how we use crime data and how we analyze that, and how we do offender-based management, how we identify where our offenders are in our community, understanding that managing offenders sometimes is easier than just chasing crime trends. How we're going to utilize technology and utilize the cloud atmosphere for all of our document management. The Microsoft Government Cloud does all of our document management and how we communicate internally and push real-time information to the officers in their cars. What this police department really focuses on is keeping officers in their cars, which could be in your neighborhoods, not in the office doing administrative paperwork.
Right.
And so that's a piece of this that maybe some people don't understand, is how hard we work on those initiatives in conjunction with some of the initiatives that are a little bit more public-facing, like the National Night Outs and some of the other community events that we do.
So is a general citizen, when they go to your website, are they able to look up some of the trending information that you share? I know we talk about some of the analysis tools that you guys use, and we sometimes go out and promote those pieces. Is someone able to go out and, if they're interested in seeing what the trending patterns are?
Yeah, we have a public-facing site called Raids Online, and what it is the public-facing site that communicates all of our crime data. People can look at what's going on in their neighborhood. Now, they won't see all of the details of the police report because it is public-facing, but they're able to see where all the criminal activity is happening, what types of criminal activities are happening. And what I like about that public-facing site is it has filters, so you can overlay filters and really do your own analytics if you'd like to, if that's something you're interested in. A lot of people that move here will come to us and ask the question, where should I live? Where are the safe places in the city? I'm looking at this apartment, but I'm not sure, should I not? And we're happy to help them. But the beauty of Raids Online, the public-facing site, is that you can do all that analysis yourself. And so it gives people an opportunity to do that. And I think that's really important, as opposed to waiting for the police department to push out crime stats, or waiting for a police department to try and identify and interpret what certain crime data means to you as a citizen. You have a chance to go in there and take a look and make it meaningful for what you're trying to accomplish in looking at the crime stats. So we constantly are dealing with media outlets. Community Services is constantly putting out Facebook or blog or Twitter feeds, trying to keep people posted. But none of those things work unless we have followers, unless people subscribe, unless people are willing to be a part of our world and wanting to do that. And so we're happy to see kind of that followership growing. But the more followers we have, the better we can disseminate information, the better we can reach out and ask them for help. And in turn, we can make this a safer place to live.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, it was fun. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. We look forward to the next time. Take care.